Hello, scholars. So this video is meant to explain briefly the methodology section of both a prospectus and a dissertation. So the examples are more in depth for a dissertation at the end, but it's to give you an idea of what you're doing for this section. So methodology refers to the methods and techniques you're going to use for research in your dissertation. For a dissertation, there are three main types: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. I never recommend that a dissertation student uses a mixed methods design. It is literally twice the work, and it takes much longer. The best dissertation is a done dissertation. If you want to do a mixed methods study, I recommend you do that after you're done with school. At this point in time, a dissertation is a long process. It's a lot of revisions and going back and forth, and you don't want to make it longer. It's literally twice the work on everything. Okay, now be aware that a research design is subject to the methodology. So it's like a subset. You have to choose the methodology first. So methodology for your dissertation is going to refer to quantitative or qualitative. The design is based on the methodology, and I will teach that in a separate video. This just focuses on methodology. So let's just cover briefly the steps of research. Generally speaking. So you need to come at this knowing the topic, and we'll develop the problem in the prospectus process, but the topic should be directly related to your degree. Okay, so if you're an educator, you're not going to study a business problem. If you're a business person, you're not studying a topic of education. Okay, and at some point in time, you will have to prove that your research topic or problem is worthy of study. There'll be a gap in the literature, a spot where researchers call for more research on a topic, which will be discussed in a separate video. All right, the next step in the process is to review the literature. This refers to peer-reviewed literature, and most of your literature review should use literature that is 5 years or less old. Doesn't mean all of it, but most of it, like 75 or 80%. And you're going to look at what is known, what is not known, where is there disagreement, what's debatable, that kind of thing, so that you have a very solid understanding of your topic. And then you formulate your research questions, objectives, and or hypotheses. Some of you won't have hypotheses. Number 4, you choose your study design. Okay, and this should include your research method. So remember, that's dependent upon the methodology first. Then you'll identify the population you want to study. Do you want to study adults working in the manufacturing sector in the United States? Do you want to study teachers in your school district? What's the population? You will sample from the population. So you need to understand who you're studying. How big is your sample? How will you sample? And most students, due to costs, use convenience sampling or purposive sampling. How will you collect your data? That includes instrumentation, but literally, how are you going to receive it? Are you going to use a survey with a web link that people are going to complete that? And then when they're done with the web link, you collect those answers? Are you interviewing people face to face? Are you interviewing them over Zoom? How are you collecting your data? You have to be very detailed. How are you going to process and analyze the data? Well, processing and analyzing data is completely different for each methodology. Qualitative is going to make a transcript of everything that was said. And for a quality dissertation, you need to figure between 15 and 30 pages per person for interviews, for example. and you transcribe it all, and then you have ask the participant to check it for accuracy. You read it and reread it, and then you start a combination of coding and collapsing till you reach final themes. Quantitative dissertations is going to go through and get rid of anything that's unusable, test for assumptions to make sure you have things like normal distribution and that kind of thing. And then you're going to run your statistical tests and possibly any post hoc tests. Once you've analyzed your data, you're going to draw your conclusions. What does that mean? And then you're going to write your findings out. A quantitative methodology is an investigation that uses numeric data. Basically, it can use categorical data like treatment versus control, men versus women, that kind of thing. It will use statistical, mathematical, or computational techniques to analyze the data. It'll look for pattern, it can test hypotheses, and even make predictions depending upon what you have. So it uses numeric type data for statistical testing. It tests hypotheses. Quantitative research is more objective because there's no researcher interaction, and the analysis is a little more black and white or scientific. The findings can be generalizable to the population. Depends on what you found. And quantitative research is replicable. The standard of a dissertation is replicable, period. Somebody needs to be able to come along and copy you. Okay. So the benefits and the limitations, the benefits for quant is it's cost effective. It's less time consuming. Analysis goes way faster than qualitative. Qualitative analysis literally takes weeks. It can take months to collect all your data for qualitative. Quantitative is usually much faster. A quantitative is more objective because there's no researcher interaction. The analysis is more clear, yes or no, black or white. The analyses, the findings can be generalized to the population, but quantitative studies are fast, focused, scientific, and relatable. The limitations of quantitative research include that it does not answer why. So you're not going to get in-depth answers. Think about a survey when you have multiple choice. It's not open-ended. So if there's things that don't go in those categories you're offering, that's not going to be there. Quantitative studies require a larger sample size. I always tell students, depending on the design, that you're somewhere around 100. Qualitative students usually need about 15, 20. And analysis can be a little more difficult for a novice researcher on quantitative. Qualitative methodology does not use numerical data. It uses words and descriptions. So this method of data collection is focused on understanding a phenomenon or perspective of the participants. It's in depth. It looks at why or how or tries to explain. Some of the methods include interviews, focus groups, and open-ended questionnaires. This form of research is more subjective because there's researcher interaction. The researcher is participating in the research. You're interviewing. You're conducting the focus group. You're answering questions, usually. It explores. Quantitative research tests hypotheses. Qualitative explores. It provides rich detail and contextual understanding as opposed to numeric summaries. So it explains why, how, or describes. The benefits include that in-depth understanding, answering why or how, and the rich insights and details. So you can gain insight from understanding, especially once you reach saturation, meaning nothing new is emerging. The limitations include a more subjective analysis. Just the presence of the researcher can influence how a participant answers the question. They might care what you think of them. They might not trust you and disclose everything. Okay. And everything that the participant says has to filter through what the researcher understands that they're saying. So it's far more subjective. The findings are not generalizable to the other populations, and qualitative, in my opinion, is very time consuming. You have to develop your instrumentation. Quantitative uses instruments that are already valid and reliable, but you have to develop your instrumentation and then test them. Then you have to recruit for participants. Both have to recruit, but it's a little more difficult sometimes to get people to participate in your qualitative study because it's a much larger demand upon their time. Okay. People are not going to line up to participate. And data analysis is a very slow process, including transcribing, verifying, coding, and collapsing. Repeated process of code and collapse into final themes where you justify the themes that you selected. Now, when you select your methodology, that section is going to be based upon research and the data available to you. So one of the questions you're going to ask yourself is, well, what kind of data am I going to have? What are my research questions like? Um, so is your data numeric, or is it open-ended descriptions, questionnaires, and interviews? Um, what are the research questions asking? Are they testing hypotheses, looking for differences between groups or over time? Are they looking to see if there's a relationship between two things? Or are they looking to see if this predicts that? Does temperature predict the number of ice cream cones sold every hour? Or are they asking somebody to describe, explain, or answer why? That all matters. So in the methodology section, you have to justify your choice. So you're going to identify your methodology, quantitative or qualitative for most of you, and then you have to justify your choice. So a prospectus only needs a short, simple justification. I picked quantitative because I did not pick qualitative because. I picked qualitative because I did not pick quantitative because. Now, in a dissertation, this section is far more developed. Now you're getting very specific, and you'll see that at the examples I posted at the end. Okay. Now, remember, when you reject a methodology, you have to say why it's not suited for you. I selected a quantitative methodology because I'm using test scores, which are numeric in nature. I am not interacting with anybody. I'm collecting it online, and I'm testing hypotheses about group differences. I did not choose qualitative because my study is not looking to determine how or why. The questions are not open-ended, and it does not test hypotheses. There you go. Simple justification at the prospectus level. And now remember, you have to cite your work. So you find textbooks and cite them as a resource. Creswell is a great research book, period. It's a great textbook. But you can also go to your library or Google Scholar. Some of the search terms that you can use are advantages or disadvantages for quantitative or qualitative. You can also use benefits or limitations and weaknesses of qualitative or quantitative. Look at them. What applies to you? Cite your work. Now, here is an example of a quantitative dissertation. Dissertation, not prospectus. So this is far more in depth, specific to that research design. And you can pause the video here for a moment and simply read this. But you can see reflected in here that because quantitative is based on an empirical methods, it tests hypotheses. And the nature of the data was numeric. A testable theory was employed in this case. Okay. Now, here's an example from a qualitative dissertation, not prospectus. So, again, this is far more in depth, but you can get an idea once you're done with your study. You should be able to answer some of these things. So, some of this was very specific to her study and not just sweeping generalities, but it's the same thing here. She wanted to understand why. She wanted descriptions. She was looking at personal experiences. So those are open-ended questions. She wasn't testing a hypothesis. She was looking for people to relate their experience to her. Okay. So open-ended interviews, um, understanding why and how thick, rich descriptions and the nature of the data was not numeric. It was words. So here's the other. You can pause the video and read the rest of this if you would like. Okay. And there are the references. Feel free to use any of these references to help you understand. But remember, the methodology section merely justifies why you selected one method over another. So, why is it the best? Why didn't you choose the other one? Cite your work. Thank you.